That White House is assured. In the meantime, this rocket landed quite close to a place where you call home. What do we need to understand about this growing conflict now, sir?
Good morning, Bill. Unfortunately, we see the aggression of Hamas hitting Israel again. Again, they're targeting civilian population. This time it was my hometown, my village, few hundred feet from my home in near Tel Aviv. We saw the casualties, 7 people are wounded. We will retaliate. If the Hamas is targeting our families, we will retaliate, we will attack back. Prime Minister Netanyahu will fly immediately after the meeting with President Trump back to Israel, and he will decide with our military officials how to respond, but Hamas will pay a price. We do not care if it was a mistake or not a mistake. Once you have a rocket landing on a house, hitting children while they are asleep, we cannot sit idly by.
And he clearly feels the urgency to go home, too. And you've got an election coming up as well. I know you're well aware of the American politics here. Steny Hoyer was making a speech over the weekend at AIPAC. That's been the heart of a lot of debate in America over the last couple of weeks. Listen to the comment he made about his own Democratic Party.
This August, I will lead what I expect to be the largest delegation ever. Probably more than 30 Democratic members of Congress, including many freshmen. By the way, there are 62 freshman Democrats. You hear me? 62, not 3.
Sir, what did you make of that statement that he made, and how concerned are you about a possible fractured relationship between Israel and the United States?
We welcome the bipartisan support. We saw it in the conference in AIPAC here in D.C., and we saw leaders from both parties standing with Israel. We appreciate it. And if you have individuals who support anti-Semitism from both parties, you have to exclude them. You have to denounce them. You have to isolate them. And eventually you will have to remove them from public office. But I believe that the voters will be smart enough to decide about that. We see what happened in London when you have an anti-Semite leading a party today in the parliament in the UK. I believe it is not the case here in the US.
Danny Danon, thank you for your time, sir. We're going to watch that visit today at the White House, and we'll see what each respective leader has to say about the relationship. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Bill.
20 past, Sandra.
Meanwhile, more trouble along our southern border where...
And that now can say to the mainstream media, why have you lied to us for 2 years?
So that's more reaction. You had the House Oversight Committee members Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows reacting to AG Bill Barr's summary report, saying it's good for President Trump and good for the United States. I think in the spirit of March Madness, you could say it was nearly a slam dunk based on the report that we got yesterday. And we were sitting here yesterday waiting for it. For about 3 hours. Yes. Didn't happen, but as soon as Hemmer and Smith said goodbye, well, we got word that it was coming out.
About a half
an hour. It
kind of
works that way, doesn't it?
Sometimes it does, but both of them making the case it's time to move on. This should be the end of this story. You look at the active tweeting out there, and social media is still on fire with all of this, and reaction continues to pour in, but they make the case to move on. Democrats say they have more questions, many of them. So we'll see. Now on to this. New problems at our southern border where communities are trying to cope with a wave of Central American immigrants being released from federal custody. Detention centers are full, and now ICE is appealing to churches and local charities to help transition those migrants from U.S. custody to American life. William Lajeunesse is live in Los Angeles with more. William.
Sandra, remember, critics dismissed calls for more border security just last month, saying apprehensions were at, quote, historic lows. Well, it wasn't true then, and it isn't now. The Border Patrol is on track to apprehend 100,000 migrants in March alone. Most are released in days. This church in Phoenix takes in 1,000 immigrants a week. They get clothes, a shower, food, and help getting a bus or plane ticket to live elsewhere till their court date, which could be 3 or 4 years away. Now, in the last 3 months, ICE released more than 100,000 families, often at bus stations, as government shelters are full, and court rulings require families be released after no more than 3 weeks. Out of 49,000 beds, ICE only has 3,000 for families. So nonprofit shelters like this step in so migrants don't live on the street.
We take care of them here in the church because if they release these people in the bus station without a cell phone, without communication, they can be a victim of crimes.
ICE agents who typically arrest criminal aliens in cities are now being sent to the border to help. Now, critics want to eliminate ICE and most detention beds altogether. But others contend the U.S. is unintentionally making matters worse, encouraging more illegal immigration by rewarding those who come with freedom.
Just about family units crossing the border, and people think it's, a victimless crime that these family units are coming for a better life. The criminal cartels in Mexico control the northern border of Mexico.
So the American Bar Association warned last week that the immigration courts are at unprecedented levels, 760,000 pending cases. It is, in their words, Sandra, on the brink of collapse. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse in Los Angeles, thank you.
Now we get to the next phase in the college cheating scam as a dozen defendants in the admissions bribery case make their initial appearance in court. We'll get a live report from Boston, let you know what's happening on that front today.
Plus, the Mueller report making waves in the 2020 camp, down 26 points out of the gate. Not much of a sell-off, but opening to the downside after the Dow sold off on Friday, you'll remember, falling 460 points. It was a big sell-off ahead of the weekend. There was concern about what's going to get done or not get done when it comes to trade. Markets continue to be very sensitive to that and react to that.
I don't remember Friday.
You know what? It's nice to have you back, Heather. I hope you had a great week off.
Thank you, Smitty. Sure did. 9:31 now. Here we go. President Trump claiming victory after the Mueller report clearing his campaign of collusion with Russia. And many, including the Democratic hopefuls on the trail, are calling for the entire report to be made public. Former DNC Chair Ed Rendell standing by with analysis. Talk to Ed in a moment here. But first, we've got Peter Ducey live on the Hill there in Washington. Let's start with you, Peter. Good morning.
Good morning, Bill. Don't expect every Democrat to delete mentions of Russian collusion from their stump speeches because Beto O'Rourke was asked if it's time to move past the Mueller investigation, and he said no.
Our democracy was attacked in a way that we haven't seen in the 243 years that we've had a democracy. Attacked by a foreign power, and I think we've got to see if it was also attacked from within by somebody who sought to assume power.
But Mayor Pete Buttigieg doesn't think it's smart for people hoping to unseat Trump in 2020 to count on a special counsel to help much.
I think this is further evidence that it would be a mistake for Democrats to think that the way for the Trump presidency to end is by way of investigation. That could, of course, happen, but we've got to be paying attention to the kinds of conditions that made it possible for somebody like him to get here in the first place.
Just minutes after the Attorney General's summary of the Mueller report dropped, Bernie Sanders took the stage at a huge California campaign rally, and he called for something that every Democratic candidate wants.
What I know is that it is a summary of the report. Well, I don't want a summary of the report. I want the whole damn report. Because nobody, especially this president, is above the law.
So while Democrats try to keep the focus on the Mueller report, the Trump campaign is trying to move on to the economy because that's where the campaign manager Brad Parscale says most of the president's attention has been all along. Bill.
That was a big crowd. He was in Northern California. Bernie was?
Yeah, he went all up the coast, San Diego, L.A., and
impressive stuff.
San Fran,
right.
Thousands at each, yep.
California goes early this year, too, as you know. Thank you, Peter. Nice to see you in Washington. Sam.
Meanwhile, the Trump 2020 campaign wasting no time putting out a new ad slamming Democrats for a collusion hoax. Take a look.
The evidence is pretty clear that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight.
We saw strong evidence of collusion.
Well, we know there was collusion with people in the campaign.
Let's bring in former DNC Chairman Ed Rendell. Ed, thank you for being here this morning. You go back to the tape and you see how many times we heard prominent Democrats talking about actual evidence of collusion. The report is out. Robert Mueller couldn't find any. Would you like to see more of an acknowledgement from your own party as to the results of this investigation?
Well, I do think we all need to read the report first. I mean, the president, in his usual style, made some statements which weren't true. He said the report totally exonerated him. It did exonerate him on any evidence of collusion, but it specifically said, and his own Attorney General said, it did not exonerate him on obstruction of justice. That has to be looked at by people who are going to look at the report and decide what to do with it. So the question is, should we do as Democrats? We should continue to do investigations when appropriate, but we should focus our attention now on legislating.
In this case, was the investigation appropriate, Ed?
Oh, yeah. 7 courts, 7 federal judges, including one who was appointed by President Trump, all ruled that the investigation was proper and legal. So there's no question about that. The president was dead wrong about that as well.
Kimberly Strassel penned a piece in the Wall Street Journal this morning. Mueller is done. Now probe the real scandal. Americans deserve a full accounting of the missteps of Comey and the FBI. In that piece, she writes, it's a searing indictment of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You know, looking back, do you think that there needs to be a look back and an investigation as to how this initially started?
Well, let me say this. I don't know how she knows what's in the report because nobody's seen the full report. And I think we should withhold judgment on that issue until we've seen the whole report. But look, everyone doubted that Mueller was going to be fair. The president kept saying witch hunt, witch hunt, witch hunt. But I knew from Mueller's reputation that he would be fair. And the fact that no evidence exists to prove something doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. It means that no evidence exists to prove it. So the Democrats should not have made the statement that there was plenty of evidence of collusion. There wasn't. It was at the margins at best. Now we should put that behind us and focus on investigating other things that need investigation. But most important, on legislating. We need to pass out of the Democratic House an infrastructure bill to get people back to work and to do something about the absolutely pathetic state of our infrastructure. Well, immigration.
It sounds like you're making the case to move on. It sounds like that you're making the case to move on. And what you just heard from the White House was that this should be end of story. 2 years, $25 million later, that this should be the end of that story. I want to ask you about what is happening for 2020, because this certainly will play a big part in what happens there. Here's the latest Fox News polling on what we're seeing so far with Democratic nominees, the preference among Democratic primary voters. Biden, although not even in the race yet, topping the list. Sanders moving up. You saw the crowds there that he had a moment ago, 23%. Harris and O'Rourke round that out at 8%. I know that you have said that at one time this would be a slam dunk for Democrats to beat the president. You've moved on for that. What changed?
Well, our party started making unforced errors. The day after the 2018 election, if we'd held the presidential election that day, President Trump would have gotten drummed out of office. Remember, Democrats got 9 million more votes for Congress in the 2018 election than Republicans did. That's 3 times what President Trump lost the popular vote by in 2016. Then we started making unforced errors. We started talking about getting rid of ICE. We started talking about the Green New Deal. We started talking about Medicare for all without talking about how we're going to pay for it. So we started to make unforced errors. We started, some of our new members started criticizing, making comments about the Middle East.
I hear you talking about a lot
of those things.
And I wonder then if you could just tie this and bring this all full circle then, looking at 2020 and Democrats' chances now that this report is out, Ed. And here's Brad Parscale. I want to end with this because we haven't shown this yet. Here is what the president's campaign manager is saying as a result of this report. So distraught and blindsided by the results of the 2016 elections, Democrats lied to the American people continually, hoping to undo the legitimate election of President Trump. Their dirty tricks have not ended. Even today, Democrats have picked up the disgraceful mantle of investigating, obstructing, and destroying the will of the American people at any cost. They failed once and they will fail again. I wonder if you could finally, Ed, just tell us what are the lessons learned here and what have Democrats learned as a result of this process and how things will change when it comes to 2020?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't, if I were a Republican, say that President Trump is out of the woods. This was just one of many, many different places that are investigating President Trump. For example, on the campaign finance violations with his lawyer, paying off the women. That's a clear violation of federal law.
That's beyond the scope of the Mueller investigation. They were looking for collusion. Go ahead.
Right, but we're talking about other investigations that are ongoing, which could be just as damaging. But that's number one. But number two, yes, it's time for us. We can continue looking at certain things which should be looked at, but we have to get back to doing the business of the people. And that's legislating on infrastructure, immigration, fixing the Affordable Care Act, things like that. That will be the key to whether we'll be successful in 2020.
All right. Ed Rendell, great to have you on America's Newsroom this morning. Thank you. All right, more on the Mueller report fallout and its impact on the 2020 race with former DNC chairwoman Donna Brazile. She will be joining us live at 10:40 a.m. Eastern Time, just a short time from now.
A lot to come, a lot more to come on that. Meanwhile, a major scare, top seed NCAA tournament late on Sunday. Watch what happened.
Out to Taylor. Jones is on him. Taylor driving in, banks it up. No, put back, in and out, and Duke survives.
I mean, wow. Duke in Central Florida, that tip right there might have won the game and destroyed a ton of brackets all across America. Duke survived 77-76 over the Knights on Sunday. Duke now heads to the Sweet 16 where they'll play their ACC rival Florida State, which will be another great game coming up here. So the madness is around us, Smitty.
I feel the energy from you.
Yeah, Zion. Hashtag Zion had 32 yesterday.
It was an exciting
Just
game.
saying, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. All right, on to this Fox News alert on a Monday morning as U.S.-backed forces defeat ISIS in Syria. But is the fight against the Islamic State really over? Retired four-star General Jack Keane will join us next.
Also, we are waiting for the Israeli Prime Minister to arrive at the White House. We should see the president as well. And if and when that happens, we will show that to you. Also, we'll tell you about the meeting today there and explain why Netanyahu is cutting that trip short. All coming up shortly, right here.
The Democrats have very much proven to be anti-Israel. There's no question about that.
As you know, over the weekend, Sarah Sanders said this. She said President Trump likes Chairman Kim. He doesn't think these sanctions will be necessary. Apparently, there were additional sanctions that will not happen. Read between the lines, sir, and tell us what you think is up.
Well, Kim came home empty-handed, and he's got hardliners at home. They really thought that they would come back with some sanction relief, particularly the tough UN resolution sanctions, and it didn't happen. So what is he doing now? He's trying to gain leverage again. He's saying, I may not go back into negotiations, but the truth is he will, because it's in his national interest. He's saying, I may conduct missile testing again, or maybe even nuclear testing. I think that's also a hollow threat. I think he knows if he does that, then he's returning the entire negotiations to a crisis mode that we were in 18 months ago. So I think it's unlikely he would do something like that. Where the Trump administration is, I think they're doing exactly what they should be doing. They are going to sanction China, who is opened the aperture and is using their shipping companies to transfer oil at sea to Korean vessels. That's got to stop. We should also go after Russia. And I think what the President was saying, there's some other sanctions that have been planned that he's going to hold in abeyance to see where Kim is moving. So we're in a pre-negotiation stage here, I think. We're filling each other out. I believe the North Koreans will come back to the negotiating table because they've got to get these economic sanctions off their back.
Thank you, General. More to come on this, okay? It is a process. I think you'd be the first one to admit that.